Fall camp starts next week, and everybody's going to be looking at the newcomers, specifically some of the freshmen. I'm going to give you 9 freshmen worth watching because I think these 9 freshmen can play a big role for Tennessee football this year. All that and more, it's your Thursday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into it, your Thursday morning Locked On Vols. I am your host, Eric Cain. I always appreciate you guys for being here, making Locked On Vols your first listen here wherever you listen to your podcast, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Watching here on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. Tell your friends about it. No better time to be linked up with Locked On Vols every single weekday morning wherever you get your podcast, free and available, than right now, because fall camp is starting next week and we are getting into some serious football content. Talking about what we've seen, not what we project or what we think, about what we have seen. We're going to be seeing stuff beginning next week, so really looking forward to that. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every single day. Today's show is going to be a fun one. In segments 2 and 3, going to throw it back, a throwback Thursday with Neyland Press Corps, Noah Taylor, okay, coming up, talking about the 1982 Tennessee-Alabama game. Tennessee won that game 35-28, snapping an 11-game losing streak to Alabama, who was ranked number 2 that year. What that game meant at the time, the celebration that ensued, and the streakiness of this series overall between Tennessee and Alabama the third Saturday in October. That's in segments 2 and 3 with Noah Taylor. But first, 9 freshmen worth paying attention to in fall camp this year. Now, I wrote it up at VolQuest.com, and I didn't really put a number. I didn't assign like a number to it. You know, this is the most important freshman to watch or whatever. If I did, obviously David Sanders Jr. would be number 1, but I'll get to him in a moment. I really did pairings at positions. David Sanders Jr. was the outlier, the only one on the offensive line. But you know, I listed Travis Smith, Radarius Jackson, a wide receiver. I listed Jaden Harmon, Jaden Perlotti at linebacker. I listed Ethan Utley, Isaiah Campbell at defensive tackle. I listed Hassan Brame and Jack Van Dorselaer at tight end. And I know that's a lot of names I'm throwing out there, but all these players could play big roles for Tennessee in one shape or another, right? Let's start with the wide receiver position. It's no secret, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that Tennessee has a lot of unproven players at wide receiver. Numbers are thin, only 7 scholarship players. Tennessee was not very good, particularly good at the wide receiver position last year. Brew McCoy, your leader and your most well-rounded wide receiver, is no longer there. Dante Thornton, your deep play threat, is no longer there. Squirrel White, who's been your most productive wide receiver the last 2 years, transferred out of the program. Tennessee's starting over, and Tennessee only has 7 scholarship wide receivers in a room that simply you just don't know. And so that's why I think these freshmen and Travis Smith and Radarius Jackson need to have a great fall camp. They both had a really good spring camp as well. Travis Smith, probably more polished, ready to roll. He was the higher rated prospect, top 100 recruit. Radarius Jackson, a four-star rated recruit, but you know, really kind of underrated in my opinion from the from the Memphis area. Really impressed in spring ball. Smith came on towards the end once he kind of got his feet under him a little bit. But you look at the wide receiver position, guys, and you've got Chris Brazzell that needs to take a step, kind of like Dante Thornton did. You got Mike Matthews that needs to be the alpha. You got Braylon Staley that needs to be productive, like the slot position typically is productive. Amari Jefferson, you just don't know. Transfer in, who's been hurt. That's it. I mean, that's pretty much it. I know I'm forgetting one other. Joakim Dotson, another freshman that wasn't even here in spring ball. So the wide receiver position, man, I've got tons of questions. That's why Travis Smith and Radarius Jackson have got to be ready to roll, because Tennessee typically doesn't play a lot of wide receivers to begin with, but with only 7 scholarship guys, injuries are a part of the game. They're going to have to play, so they need to be ready. Go to linebacker, Jaden Perlotti and Jaden Harmon. Both those guys didn't participate in spring ball, coming off some offseason procedures, some shoulder issues. I like the linebacker group. I think the linebacker group can be pretty good, but they need these 2 guys, these true freshmen, for depth pieces. I think Jaden Harmon can be a stud. Sideline to sideline, really good in space, very smart, high IQ. Jaden Perlotti was a long-time target for Tennessee in this class. Jaden Harmon, highly rated 4-star. Jaden Perlotti, a 3-star. Both these guys need to be ready to roll to add some depth. Potentially could sneak into that top 4, top 5 rotation. to help an Arian Carter, Jeremiah Thielander, Edwin Spillman, maybe a Jordan Burns. Brendan Ains, another freshman as well. But Jaden Harmon, Jaden Perlotti, the Jadens did not participate in fall and spring ball, so they're going to have to play catch-up in a massive way here next week, beginning next week. And they need to be ready to roll, not only for special teams, but again, for overall depth at the linebacker position. Tennessee hasn't had a lot of depth at linebacker the last couple of years, forced to play a lot of young guys. Now those young pups are older, right? Arian Carter, Jeremiah Thielander, they're older now. You still need some depth there, and that's where the Jadens come in. Let's go to the interior of the defensive line. Tennessee lost Amari Thomas, Elijah Simmons, and Omar Norman-Lott from the defensive tackle spots from last year. Amari Thomas, team captain, been there, played significant role in this team since 2021. Elijah Simmons has been on this team since 2019, I believe, maybe 18. He was here forever. He was a role player. Omar Norman-Lott the last 2 years proved to be one of the better interior pass rushers in all college football. Went on to be a second-round pick by the Kansas City Chiefs. Those three guys are gone. You bring back Bryson Eason, who's been here forever since the Reagan administration. Jackson Moy is going to be a really, really good player. David Hobbs is going to be your third option at defensive tackle. You don't really know about the durability of Nathan Robinson and Jamal Wallace because those two guys feel like they're always beat up, and they were beat up in spring. So that's why the two interior options at freshman, Isaiah Campbell, a former 5-star, and Ethan Utley, a highly rated 4-star for the in-state, massive, massive growth opportunities in fall camp. They kind of had their baptism by fire a little bit back in spring ball, kind of learn what it takes to play at this level, learn what it takes to play at Tennessee, and learn what it takes to play for a guy like Rodney Gardner. And Tennessee likes to employ a deep rotation, specifically a defensive tackle, because there's two spots at a time, and they're big boys. So Ethan Utley and Isaiah Campbell will be in the rotation. They need a fall camp. They need a good fall camp. They need some momentum heading into the season because they are going to play a role. So Ethan Utley, Isaiah Campbell, certainly worth watching in fall camp if you're the Tennessee Volunteers. Three more to highlight, two at the tight end position. That is Desan Brame and Jack Van Dorselaer. I know a lot of fans hate 12 personnel, multiple tight ends, not another wide receiver. I get it. But when you were built the way you were last year, not a lot of explosives out there outside of Dante Thornton, a wide receiver, really solid run game, top 15 defense, and a young quarterback. 12 personnel was kind of your best friend. It was kind of your safety blanket a little bit. Tennessee, again, that's not your base personnel, but Tennessee wanted that option the first 3 years, and the system couldn't run it because they only felt comfortable with two tight ends. Last year, they felt comfortable with three, Ethan Davis being that third one. This year, it's Miles Kitzelman and Ethan Davis. They're in the search of a third one. Cole Harrison might have something to say about that, but really, the future of the tight end position is Desan Brame and Jack Van Dorselaer. I get some real Joshua Josephs, James Pierce vibes with this duo. Like, both I think are going to be solid. Both are going to be big-time contributors. Early on, as a true freshman, Joshua Josephs played more, than James Pierce. James Pierce played in mop-up duty. Joshua Josephs, was that third Leo. Not saying that he was better than James Pierce, but he was just more polished and ready to go. I think that's where Jack Van Dorselaer comes in. Had a big game, had a big moments in the spring game. I recognize that, but has, from a physicality standpoint, he was a defensive lineman in high school. I think that he's farther along right now than Desan Brame, who was a skilled guy and missed a lot of spring ball. So can one of those guys step up and emerge as the third tight end and give Tennessee the flexibility to go 12 personnel if needed? Again, 12 personnel is two tight ends on the field at one time. I don't know. We'll see. But I think these two guys, bright futures for both, but I think these two guys specifically, big-time watch. And you need to watch these guys in fall camp because I think that they could play a role for the Volunteers for sure. And then the last one I'm going to highlight is David Sanders Jr., 5-star plus offensive tackle. Again, if I was ranking these 1 through 9 or whatever, he would be number 1, obviously. So I guess you could say I'm saving the best for last. David Sanders, if healthy, is going to be your starting right tackle. That does not mean it's going to be smooth sailing, no hiccups, nothing like that. I mean, again, he is a true freshman. You can be rated 5 stars, be a top 10 player in the country, all that and more, and that's great. But at that age in this league, you are going up and blocking 22-year-old defensive end Leos that are going to be first or second round picks, come April or May, right? I mean, it is just a different ball game. So there's going to be some lumps along the way. There's going to be a learning curve. I expect David Sanders Jr. to be so much better in October than what he is August the 30th when you open up against Syracuse. all the talent, all the athleticism, the knowledge, it's all there. He had a great spring. He's had a great offseason, put on some weight a little bit. He's been a sponge, learning and all that. He's been everything you want from a guy that you've invested so much into and a guy that has that 5-star top 10 rating, right? But if all's healthy, he's your starting right tackle. And so he needs a really good fall camp to have some momentum, have some confidence going into the season for sure. So those are 9 true freshmen that I think are very much worth watching. Keep tabs, right? A week into fall camp, be like, okay, well, have I heard anything about Radarius Jackson lately? 2 weeks into fall camp, it's like, oh, what's the latest on the Pilates at line or at the Jadens at linebacker? These 9, maybe not the only members of the true freshman class, but these 9 I think are certainly worth paying attention to this year in fall camp for the University of Tennessee. Oh, my famous line, what say you? Anybody that I left off this list? Who else would you add to this list? So much and more. Who are you looking forward to in seeing this year for Tennessee from the freshman class? We'd love to hear from you at _Caner and at Locked On Vols. Throwback Thursday coming up next with Noah Taylor, taking it back to 1982. Tennessee comes from behind, defeats Alabama, snapping an 11-game losing streak to the Alabama Crimson Tide on the third Saturday in October. We'll take a look at that. We'll relive it and look at that series overall when we come back right here on your Thursday Locked On Vols. Stay tuned. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You've already been following the action, so why not make it more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends might be getting sunburned at the beach right now, right? I mean, again, like you're already watching sports. You're watching Major League Baseball. You're watching NBA Summer League. You're watching golf on the weekends. So why not put some coin in your pocket and make it even more exciting to watch, I guess is what I'm trying to say. FanDuel, you can track your favorite matchups. The app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions every single week. So many fun ways to bet. Easy to use, fun, fast payouts as well, and it makes the regular season games like baseball feel like much-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right on into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I am a part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Again, one more time, new customers, just $5. You're going to get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to go ahead and get started. FanDuel, it's where you can make every moment more. Noah Taylor joining us for Throwback Thursday here on Locked On Vols. Noah Taylor, the owner-operator of Neyland Press Corps, and looking real good. Going back to 1982. That's what you wrote about earlier this week on a Monday. You have something new up on your Substack, which the link is there in the show notes if you guys want to please subscribe. You post something new every Monday, and this week it was on the 1982 Tennessee win over number 2 Alabama on the third Saturday in October. A game that really kind of parlayed into a lot of success in the 1980s. We'll get to that here in a moment. A game, a win that ended yet another streak in this series. This has been the streakiest series that Tennessee's ever been a part of, and we'll talk about that later on. But it was a win, 35-28, that snapped an 11-game losing skid to Bear Bryant and Alabama, and it was in come-from-behind fashion. Take us back, Noah, to 1982. Paint the picture for us at Shields-Watkins Field when Tennessee came back to win 35-28.
Yeah, it was kind of I think to look at this game, you got to go back a little bit to Johnny Majors getting the job at Tennessee in 1977, which, the streak had already been ongoing by the time he took the job, but, was coming off a national title win at Pitt and kind of had things rolling there. But, I think the offer to come home was a little bit too enticing for him to turn down. So obviously came back to Tennessee where he was an All-American player in the mid-1950s. Had a couple of signature wins in 1979. Those first 2 years, I mean, it was a real rebuilding job for him. Tennessee has losing seasons in 77, 78, but 79, you have a bit of a breakthrough with a win over Auburn at home. They beat a top 15 Notre Dame team at home. But I think 1982 was kind of the one that maybe Tennessee fans would revere, that lived in that era, probably revere a little bit more because it was Alabama, because it was Bear Bryant, because, like you'd mentioned, they had lost 11 straight in the series. But as far as that game going into it, the buildup, Alabama was undefeated, like you mentioned, number 2 in the polls. They had just totally routed Penn State the week before. I think like 42-21, a Penn State team, by the way, that went on to win the national championship that year. So, and Tennessee was sitting at 2-1. They'd lost to Auburn. They had lost to Duke at home, but had beaten Iowa State, Washington State, and the week before that Alabama game played a top 20 team, LSU team in Baton Rouge, and tied. So I think there was a little bit of positivity going into that. But if you were a fan sitting in the stands, and maybe if you're watching this and you were there, you could tell us about it. But maybe that positivity kind of got thrown out the window when Alabama went up 14-3. Maybe some shades of those previous 11 games. So Tennessee's down 2 scores early. It started to turn around in the second quarter. Alan Cockrell hit Willie Galt for a 52-yard touchdown. Alabama goes down and scores again before halftime, but Tennessee's got a little bit of life in it, and then just kind of started to run away with it in the third quarter. Tennessee's up 2 scores at one point. Bear Bryant later said in his post game that he thought the score was a lot more lopsided the game was a lot more lopsided than maybe the final score looked. But Alabama comes back in the fourth quarter. A little bit of shades of this 2022 game that a lot of fans remember here a couple of years ago. But Alabama comes back in that fourth quarter, gets within 1 score, gets the ball back with about a minute and a half left, and drives to inside Tennessee's 20-yard line. So you can imagine, what that scene might have been like in the stadium as they're driving the ball there. And they had a couple opportunities to throw it in the end zone late. One thing in the story I think is really cool is that first throw to the end zone was batted away by Lee Jenkins. Alabama gets another shot, throws it, the end zone again. Lee Jenkins is right there, knocks it again, this time into Mike Terry's hands. And Tennessee holds on to win with about 17 seconds left, get the ball back, takes the knee, and then I guess pandemonium just kind of rained down on Shields-Watkins Field. Again, very similar to 2022. The goalpost came down, I think, a lot quicker if you go back and watch the clips of this game. But goalposts come down, fans jam every roadway in Knoxville. The strip was crazy from everything I read. Female students were going around taking their lipstick and writing the final score in every window they could find. Somebody set off a smoke bomb. You look at some of the photos, which I included in the story. Cops were really trying to hold fans back. Didn't really work. But that goalpost, if you're watching, you may have a piece of it. I know there's one thing I read that a lot of people cut it up. There's a story as well of former Tennessee players that played at the time that had cut it up and sold it around town because they needed the money. And so people, even when I posted the story, a couple people commented on Twitter and Instagram that had said they have a piece of it right now on their mantle or whatever. So a very big win over Alabama that I think you could say is certainly maybe even a top 5 win in program history.
Yeah, I'm sure that there are a few, not many, but a few individuals that probably have a piece of that goalpost from 1982 and some of the goalposts from 2022. Both presented in some way, shape, or form. And of course, a lot of that, both really, a lot of that probably in the the river there from the south side of the stadium. But in reading your story, I don't know which quote you got it from the Journal or from the Sentinel or from the yearbook or whatever, but Johnny Majors is quoted after the game saying, "I don't know how long eternity is, but it felt like that end of the game was close to it." And then he was so nervous, and obviously when you drive down there and you have a couple of shots at the end zone to tie the game, again, Tennessee was leading 35-28. The defensive interception there at the end sealed it. Had to come back out and take a knee to completely end the game, but Tennessee was down 21-13 at half, and then just drilled them the rest of the way. Just drilled them. I mean, obviously Alabama was held to just 1 touchdown in the second half. Chuck Coleman had a 34-yard touchdown. Fuad Vez drilled a 40-yard field goal. Mike Miller also hauled in a 39-yard touchdown reception. Plays were being made there in the second half, and I think that's where Bear Bryant, who retired 2 months after that, that was his last game against Tennessee, kind of said that it felt like Tennessee beat him down a little bit worse than what it was. Want to continue talking about this game and really what this meant for Tennessee and more on the celebration afterwards and what all that meant. Coming up next as we continue on with the Throwback Thursday segment, Noah Taylor with Neyland Press Corps looking back at Tennessee's 35-28 win over the Alabama Crimson Tide on the third Saturday in October in 1982. So you have Tennessee that won this game, and as soon as the game was over, they hoisted Johnny Majors on shoulder pads and all that, and finally he got the midfield. He shook Bear Bryant's hand and all that, but 95,000 flooded the stadium. Probably not all of them, but a bunch of the 95,000 in attendance there flooded Shield Watkins Field, took down the goalpost. They were carrying it on the strip, and parts of it went into the river. I mean, it was reminiscent of a lot of what we saw in 2022, right? I mean, they've done this a couple of times before, and you already mentioned it, smoke bomb and the lipstick and all that. And what I would love to be just a casual observer, right? Like, one of the things in my career that I'm the most jealous of, I remember in 2022 when Tennessee snapped the 15-game losing streak, and as soon as the game was over, it was David Ubben of the Athletic and Mike Wilson of the Sentinel, and they just followed. They just followed the goalpost. Yeah. They just followed it and went all night long. I think they were back at Neyland Stadium at like 1 or 2 in the morning. They just followed it just to chronicle what happened, and that's really cool. It beats my 4 takes that I posted after the game was over for sure. But those are the type of memories and games that Tennessee fans obviously hold on to, and certainly 1982 is one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one thing too, when you look at it, what makes it such a great win, you mentioned a minute ago, that was Bear Bryant's last against Tennessee, and he was a guy that had a lot of success against Tennessee. And you just look at the trajectory of the programs going back to 1970. Doug Dickey had won 3 straight against Alabama and kind of turned the tide, if you allow the pun there, kind of turned the tide in that rivalry. But then left for Florida, and Bill Battle gets elevated to head coach. And then in 1970, Bill Battle, a Birmingham native and a former Bear Bryant player, I mean, he takes it to Alabama. Tennessee won that game 24-0. I think Alabama turned the ball over like 8 times in that game. Tim Priest, Jackie Walker had an unbelievable afternoon. It is funny. I talked to Coach Battle last year, probably about a week before he passed away, for a different story, but he loved to talk about that game and about that win, mostly the players, the guys involved. But you could tell it meant a lot to him to beat Bear Bryant, and he said, I won't forget it, but it was some quote, he was like, yeah, he must not have liked it because he didn't let us do it again. And that was kind of, a different era, the trajectory of the programs through the decade of the 1970s, a lot of what ifs there. What if Doug Dickey had stayed at Tennessee? Would that rivalry not be as streaky as it ended up being? Bear Bryant adopts the wishbone offense, and then Alabama goes on an unbelievable run, wins a bunch of national titles in the 1970s, and that carries over into the 80s, while Tennessee, probably about 1974, 75, starts to taper off and try to rebuild the program, which is where Johnny Majors comes in and has a really big rebuilding job ahead of him again, when he could have had probably smooth sailing at Pitt, where he had things really going there. But I mean, this win, it really changed the trajectory for Tennessee, I think, in the 1980s. Not only did they win in 82, they go on to win in 83, 84, 85. And that 85 season, they win their first SEC title in 16 years. They win the Sugar Bowl. A couple years after that, Tennessee kind of struggled, but then starts to get it back together in 87. 89, obviously, one win away from being a potentially national champion that year. Goes to the Cotton Bowl, beats Arkansas. And then obviously, you know what happened in the 1990s with the end of Major's tenure, and then obviously Philip Fulmer won the national title in 98. I think this game, we mentioned the win over Notre Dame in 79, the win over Auburn. Those were big wins in the early in the Johnny Majors era. But I think this win really kind of allowed Tennessee to realize that it could win those type of games. And it didn't happen overnight. It's not like, Tennessee finished that 82 year 6-5. It wasn't like it just flipped a switch all of a sudden, but I think it did lay the groundwork for the program's success. And when you throw that in there, again, you throw in the fact that it was the last time Tennessee would face Bear Bryant. It's certainly a game that you see why fans love it so much.
So I'm going back all the way to the earliest recorded game, at least on UT Athletics' site, between Tennessee and Alabama. They're history's funny, right? You got one program sometimes to say, oh, well, we have this record against this said team, and they say, no, the record's actually this, because our records go back, to this date, and that's always a fun game to play. I know, on a lower level, Carson Newman and Tusculum have that battle in football as well. Anyway, 1901. The first meeting, according to the website, tied. Do you know if that's the first meeting officially? I'm sure you do. You were probably there.
It is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You were there. Yeah. So 1901, the first meeting, Tennessee, Alabama, tied at 6. Alabama won the next year. Tennessee won the next year. Then Alabama won from 05, and they played every year. And Alabama won all the way until 1913. Tennessee won the next 3 matchups. Tennessee won the next 5 out of 6 matchups. Alabama won the next 5 matchups. Then it was Tennessee 3. Alabama won the next 4 or 5. Tennessee won. Oh my gosh, here's the long one for Tennessee. Tennessee won 8 of the next 9, or excuse me, 9 of the next 10. And then Alabama, starting in the 60s, won 6 straight. Tennessee won 4 straight. And then we get to 1970, the last win Tennessee had over Alabama, kind of leading into this game we're talking about. Alabama won 11 straight. Tennessee comes from behind, wins in 82, wins the next 3 in a row up to 85. Alabama then takes from 86 all the way to 92. Tennessee wins in 93. Alabama wins in 94. Tennessee wins 7 straight from 95 to 01. And then honestly, 7 of the next 9 up until 04. Alabama gets 05, Tennessee wins 06, and then it was 15 straight for Alabama up until 2022, and we know what happened then. Tennessee's won the last 2 or 3. So, again, I know that was long, I know that was unneeded, but just to show you how streaky this series is, it's truly bizarre, man. I mean, I remember one of my first UT football memories, I'm not sure which game it was, but it was one of those, I was with my dad, and I remember it was one of those, it was at Neyland Stadium with Tennessee won. It'd been a couple of years since Tennessee had beaten Alabama, and there were fights in the stand, and it was crazy. It was like Tennessee just won the Super Bowl. I mean, a win over Alabama always means an awful lot.
Yeah, it's definitely a big deal, and I think that makes it a unique rivalry in that way. And I've talked to guys, for stories and things that Kirk McNair's one guy that used to work at the Daily Times where I worked, obviously a lot longer before I did, and obviously he's covered Alabama for a long time and worked under Bear Bryant as a sports information director and during that era. And man, I remember interviewing him about the third Saturday in October a couple of years ago, and he said that game just meant so much to Bear Bryant. It meant a lot more to him than Auburn did. The week of the game, he'd have the scout team wearing orange and white. They had new apartments being built next to Alabama's practice field, and he was just sure that Tennessee administrators were renting out those rooms to watch them. Like it meant a lot to him. And kind of going back a few weeks ago, and we talked about General Neyland, I think it kind of started there, even though Bear Bryant was at Kentucky at the time. He never beat Neyland. I think that kind of sat with him, and obviously you go to Neyland Stadium and there's memories of him everywhere. So I think that goes back to then, but he was obsessed with beating Tennessee, and obviously had a long run of success against them. And again, I think that made, for Tennessee fans, a lot sweeter to do that. And you kind of look at it this way. It's a little bit similar to the Nick Saban situation. Obviously, he retired a year later after that 2022 game, but you still hear Tennessee fans say that 22 game was kind of the beginning of the end for Alabama. Whether or not that's true, it's kind of funny, the parallels between the two.
I don't think that was true, but I will say, I mean, I thought Nick Saban was going to freaking. I've never seen Nick. I don't cover Alabama. I don't watch every single Alabama game. Why would I want to? But I have never seen Nick Saban so upset and so frustrated and so beside himself than he was at the game at Alabama in 2021. Tennessee didn't win that game. Tennessee gave Alabama fits. Saban was beside himself, and I'll always remember that one. Again, Tennessee didn't win, but I'm like, I have never seen Nick Saban just that visibly. He's just like, I don't know what to do. I can't stop it. And I thought that was really, really cool. So anyway, man, you look at the Tennessee-Alabama game. It's going to be another big one coming up this year. We'll see what happens. Tennessee hasn't won at Alabama since 2003. New quarterback for Alabama, and Ty Simpson. Tons of unknowns. I think it's going to be Ty Simpson. Tons of unknowns for Tennessee offensively as well, but it should be another really, really good one. Tennessee and Alabama on the third Saturday in October. What's coming up next week, if you want to give a little teaser? Maybe you don't know yet, so sorry if I'm putting you on the spot, but what's coming up next week on your Substack?
Yeah, I kind of play it by ear, I guess. Do a lot of reading during the week, a lot of like digging in the archives, and it kind of just whatever kind of pops out to me. Obviously, this game did because of you go through the archives, you can see the photos, you read some of the articles. I mean, there were whole sections in the front page of the News Sentinel that were written by just regular report, not even sports guys that were at the game. These were guys that were, like you talk about the stories of following the goalposts in 22, very similar stories that were in the News Sentinel in 82 as well, going as far as West Town Mall and saying the whole place shut down because everybody was so invested in the game, and so it was a big deal. But I read that and I was like, this is too good not to tell this week. So haven't come up with one yet for next Monday, but always excited to see what I find. I got a new book this week. Actually, it's an old book, but new to me, written by Marvin West, former News Sentinel sports editor, about Tennessee's run from 1960 to 1969 in football. So a lot of great stories in there that I could probably try to tell as well. So we'll see what happens. But a lot of, like we said last week, got a lot of exciting stuff coming up. Some interviews already set up with some former players about some very exciting games that happened in the 60s. So we'll see where that goes.
Really great stuff there from Noah Taylor. We do it every Thursday right here on the show. We call it Throwback Thursday, reliving the fun and exciting win over Alabama 35-28, number 2 ranked Alabama back in 1982 that snapped an 11-game losing skid in the series that has been streaky one way or the other pretty much the entire time on the third Saturday in October. So really good stuff. Looking forward to catching up with Noah Taylor coming up next week as well, again, for our Throwback Thursday segments. All right, that's going to do it here for today's edition of Locked On Vols. One day closer to the start of fall camp. Can't wait for that to happen. Media days on Tuesday. First official practices on Wednesday. I'm going to be there. We'll bring you some notes, insider information, all that and more right here on Locked On Vols each and every day. Appreciate you guys, as always, for making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch each and every single day. Every dayers, thank you. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell that Tennessee fan in your life this is the show for them. Weekday mornings when you wake up, free and available. All right, until tomorrow, everybody, appreciate you for being here. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday.